Oh my God.
Oh, hello.
Oh my God. We're here. Wow. You really never know what you're going to get with that, like starting soon screen music data. Last
Yeah, I
time,
know.
last time it was like, I don't even, what do we say it was? It was like a quilt rave or something with like
Yeah, it was like
two.
heavy metal quilt rave. I don't know. And then tonight we had like, it's kind of funky. And then it was like, oh man, I could really use a nap.
Yeah, it was totally songs to take a nap to.
Well, that's what you get when you have to use royalty-free music. If anybody would like to write the opening music, what I think what they call it, the bumper music, like all that kind of stuff for us, gratis, you're very welcome to do so. But I don't even know any musicians that do that kind of work, so.
I do, but I don't, how would I even approach somebody about writing that? Like, hey, so we've got this live stream. Like, here's our mascot. Could you write us a tune? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I've been thinking about asking AI to do it. We'll see.
Does AI do that?
Yeah, you can ask AI to write you a song.
Oh, okay. That really seems like a topic for another discussion another day. I
Definitely
really
another day.
I really think that you should try that.
We'll see.
So we're here. It's I can't believe the month's like over. It it's scary.
Yes, I know. Today is September 24th. It has been 20 days since we arrived in Terrytown, and it feels still like I'm still packing to go. Like where did this month go? I don't understand.
Yeah, well that and like we're already like this is it. Like we're already like
We're
done
done with
with our book.
our almost.
So like I
Well,
guess I guess
next week is very exciting because it'll be our Merikay interview, but also I'm sad to be done with the book because I like reading it.
well I was gonna say like let's just start the evening off here with just a couple announcements like this one. So everybody don't forget. You'll see stuff on social media, but just like, hey, this is next week at on the first 7 p.m. Not 8, 7 p.m. Eastern because we can take a long time. We're gonna talk to Mary Kay. She's gonna be live here on the screen. And we get to talk to her and see her and we love her. And Mary Kay, if you're in the car, drive safe. Um, so we've got that. And then also, because I was dumb and forgot that it was the last Tuesday of the month that we're together. Ah, what am I doing? Go back. What are you doing? Can you see that?
I can see October, yes.
Okay. I don't know what I was doing. That was weird. Um, so I scrambled real fast and like threw an October calendar together. Which I know has sad red things in it because Stephanie and I are traveling together again. So,
Well,
but
it's
trust me,
only
like,
one day where I won't be around, so
um, so we've got our interview here, and then we've built in like a bumper before we do our next book where we have a free night to oh, I have that as 2 p.m. That's not gonna be 2 p.m. That one's gonna be like 7. Um, so I'll change that when I put it out on social media. But we built in a free night so that we can like look at something like an exhibit or something fun. We haven't decided yet. And then we have our needlework nights in there and our regular stuff, and we'll start our new book on the 15th. So you will get the assignment for it on the 8th. And that's that. Yes, and there is Mr. New
so
Book.
it's To Honor and Comfort Native Quilting Traditions, and it's by well, it's edited by Marsha MacDowell and Curt Dewhurst, who I believe is her significant other, I
Oh,
think.
I
Yeah.
had no idea. There
So
have
yeah, I'm
been
really looking.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm really looking forward to reading that one because I've had it for a while and I have not had a chance to other than just to flip through it.
I had totally forgotten that I had it until you brought it up, and apparently I do. But there have been in the last couple of videos and then on social media there have been affiliate links for books and Amazon for people to get that, but you know, you still have some more time. And they're very affordable copies.
And speaking of links, if you are interested in winning a personalized book plate for your soft covers book, you can enter our giveaway, and we're gonna make Mary Kay do the drawing. So it'll be next week. You don't have to be here to win, because I know lots of people can't make it here on Tuesday nights and watch the recording later. So you don't have to be here, but you do have to enter. And so I am putting a link in the chat that I put out there the other day, but I was derelict in having it ready for the last show. So it's tinyurl.com/QN giveaway. That's going to become a standing link. So anytime we have a giveaway, that will be the link, and we'll just change, the form that it goes to. So, and I guess probably the last disclaimer I would add with that is we're not going to use any of your personal information for any reason other than complete evil to spam you forever. Not really. We will only use it if you win to send you your gift. Beyond that, we will not bother you. I don't have time to bother you.
Well, unless we're traveling somewhere near your house and we need a place to stay, and then we're gonna.
This is true. Don't be surprised if Cake and Jill roll up one day. So I mean, that's the danger. That's a danger you put yourself in when you give us your address.
Yeah, that's really why we do these giveaways and why she made this thing. It's just so that we can have a network of couches and beds to sleep in across.
We're still waiting for the Hawaii one. Gosh darn it.
All right. So let's get a crack in here on our.
Yeah.
It makes me really sad when we finish books. It makes me feel sad, but accomplished. We've read quite a few books already since we started doing this, and we haven't even been doing it a full year yet.
I know. It seems like, wait, what? Our first book was just yesterday.
I know.
Our second book being the one we hated very much just yesterday.
I think I'll forever be scarred by that book.
Well, it went to Tish when I went to QuiltCon. She took it from me, and as far as I know, she's still alive.
You mean
that book did not do her in?
Inflicted it on her. She didn't take it
she
from
asked
you.
For it.
Cursed her.
She asked for it. She asked for it.
And somehow she still likes you?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, she'll still show up sometimes. So yeah, she hasn't disowned me yet.
We're in the last couple of chapters here. We're in Looking for Better Times and our conclusion.
Yeah, and I really like Mary Kay kind of just does like a very concerted sort of look at like the alphabet soup of government programs. And like for the longest time it took me, well, I guess it didn't take me that long, but when I was like, NRA, what did they have to do with? And it was like, no. We're not talking about the National Rifle Association. They took NRA from the National Recovery Act. But yeah, these are all very, very interesting programs. And Tennessee was like definitely a big economic development area because of the Tennessee Valley Authority. So that is really interesting that, she brought that piece of Tennessee history in here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really interesting topic. And I think if it's something like if you're interested in researching this era and these types of quilts, that looking at the government programs is a really, really, really good thing. There is a book, and I meant to grab it. And I started the Zoom before I could grab it, but it's not about Tennessee, but it's about the WPA programs where they made quilts and curtains and things like that. And I know Mary Kay actually, I assume she still has it. She actually has a quilt from that project. I think it was in Wisconsin, I think. So maybe we can convince her to hang it up so we can see it. Although, it doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with Tennessee, but other than that's where it is now, I suppose. But anyway, long-winded way of saying that all these government programs during this really tough time are very interesting, and the things that they did. And moving into the quilts here, the TVA quilts, this part I really loved because the Lazy Man quilt, this one, very famous image in African American quilts. And As soon as I saw it, I was familiar with it, right? I mean, you're familiar with it, right?
Vaguely.
Okay. Maybe
Vague.
I've watched a few more.
Hi, Janet.
I watched maybe I watched a few more, like, I don't know, things about that where this quilt ends up. It
Okay.
comes up with Depression era stuff. It comes up with African American quilt making, but I've never heard the story behind it. I don't know why I thought I kind of knew about this quilt, but then reading what Mary Kay has documented here, and um, I at first I wasn't sure if she actually had interviewed Rose Clement Bond, but it does look like when you go to page 80, she's quoting her. So I think that like she did have an interview with her.
Well,
And
she claims in her notes to us that this is her best quilt research ever.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and
So,
this was like, I was like, wow. I had not this all of this information. I was like, this is never part of the story about that
well,
quilt.
and isn't that the point that she's always making? Is like how much of
Yeah,
this actual story are we always missing?
exactly, exactly. And there's so much. I mean, I just think in general, I'm not always reading books about quilting, even though I wish that I
You're
was extra hours
not?
in the day. I know, right? I wish there was extra hours in the day so I could, or if I could read two at a time, like at the same time, that would be fabulous. But I do listen to other things sometimes. And I was actually listening to, it's a true crime story.
Of
And
course it
the
is.
actual story, like I had heard about this story a million times, but the actual story, like the full blown, like investigative journalist story, was so different than what I thought. And I was like, what? Like, we have to know this, the history behind things, And
Mhm.
I think that, authors and journalists and people who report on information, I know that, we have a short attention span. So I feel like information, people are always trying to get it like out in snippets and clips and headlines and, but being robbed of this detail is like a terrible thing because
Mm.
there's so much nuance to some of this stuff. And kind of understanding this trajectory with Ruth Clement Bond and this group of women, and then these designs and what they meant. I'm like, wow, this is like a huge piece of American history, not just, a group of women making quilts, but like this relates to the TVA and the Depression and all this stuff. It's
Well,
fantastic.
and also not to mention the fact that you see here almost kind of like a real life game of telephone, and how, the message changes throughout, because just looking at this image, I actually interpret it differently than she claims it's meant to be.
Hmm.
So it like, some people want their art to just be interpreted differently by different people, but like if you have a very specific message, if that message gets taken away from your, work of art, that completely changes your work. Sometimes,
Hmm.
in ways that like we're not even considering. And like you said, I'll just show again because you showed real quick. You know, if you can't control your message, is it still technically like your art, I guess, is a way, you know what I mean? Like it's your message that you need to have
Yeah.
with the piece, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I think with works of art like this, yes, if she had a particular meaning, it's a shame that that got like
Mm-hmm.
separated from the quilt or isn't
Mm-hmm.
discussed or people just don't know about it. Because she does have, and you're right, I feel like looking at these images, I mean, I think that the fist with the lightning bolt, I feel like what that is conveying, like you kind of get the gist of it. But yeah, the lazy man image it is, I mean, and in this, again, I mean, gosh, this could be looking at it through the lens of a white person. But I feel like I've even heard Black quilt makers describe this differently than what Ruth Clement Bond described it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of like, hmm. So, I mean, you're absolutely right that the message can get lost there, and that's could be problematic. I know that I like my quilts are art quilts, and I often don't put a lot of information with them because I want people to come up with their own story. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to tell them what to think.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, this in the sense of this quilt having a particular like meaning and message. Yeah, I mean it's a shame. Like I think that the part about the white hand extending, with the uniform, and to me that it's like punching.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
That was my
negative
first
thing.
interpretation as
Hmm.
well, like keeping you down kind of a
Hmm.
thing. And then where she points out, um, let's see, who are we talking to here? That's Ruth. Hold on, I just want to make sure I'm quoting the right person. And then we've got, help me out here. Who, I've got a quote here
So
by
Ruth,
Rose.
so Ruth is her
The
husband was
designer.
the, yeah, she's the designer. Her
And
husband
then
was the
Rose is the
Tennessee Valley.
person.
Yeah.
Yes, Rose is who we're
Well,
talking
Rose
to.
was one of the makers, and then Grace was the other one. So Grace Tyler was one of the makers, and then Rose Thomas was another maker.
All right, go on with whatever you were about to say, because I feel now like I might be misquoting someone. I want to
Well,
make sure I'm not doing that. So,
yeah, I just, like I said, this story I think is again lost. And when people usually talk about these quilts. So I think this is fantastic that Mary Kay was able to get all of this detail. Um, the other thing, I mean, while you're looking for what you're looking for, the piece about how um, Ruth Bond's husband in 34 went to the TVA offices at Muscle Shoals and
mhm.
took the fist quilt to show to some visiting dignitaries and gave it to them.
Oh my, don't even get me. I literally wrote like a thing around here where I'm like,
I
oh,
would have been like, and
divorce.
he survived?
Yeah, divorce immediately.
Yeah,
And
I
the
was
fact
like,
that it says in here it took it like even 50 years later, she still wasn't over its loss.
yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, I would have murdered my husband like on the spot.
Okay, so
But
what I was looking for was, so here is another version of
mhm,
that quilt we were just looking at. And this one is made by this one is Rosemary Thomas.
mhm.
And
Yeah, that's the Rose Thomas one.
she's the one who points out, um the question Mary Kay asked, what is the viewer to think about the this man's choice? And Rose replied, "We wanted to show that he chose the TVA job. It has a hopeful message."
Mhm.
To me, as the outsider looking in, if I didn't know that, it doesn't signify hope for me. And
Yeah,
that's
and
why.
I think the other piece of this, I mean, that I have to remember, and I mean, like what you see is what you see, but we also have to remember we're looking at this through the lens of 2024,
Oh,
and I mean, we
absolutely. That's
have,
what,
yeah.
again, like that's why it's
Yeah.
like, wow, to be able to add the layer of having, like, luckily we document better now because of things like this, where we're so sad that we don't have, certain things. But it's another one of those driving that home, like, everybody sign your quotes and your messages and your things and your that, so that people don't, I mean, in this instance, I guess I feel like I would be misinterpreting someone, but to them, they might say all interpretations are valid,
Hmm.
Um, but I feel like I feel really sad when I don't have whatever the initial message was that was intended,
Hmm.
even if my interpretation might be different.
Yeah. No, I get it. I totally understand that. Can we leave this chapter with page 82 and this small child with two horses hand plowing a field? Wow. I mean, just the fact that it's a small child just like wrenches my heart out. But I mean, this hard labor that used to go into this kind of work. And it's really within like, I mean, it's 1934. My grandmother was born in 25. She died 6 years ago. So, but somebody born around 1934 could still be alive today. So within an elderly person's lifetime, people were still plowing with no mechanical means. I mean, it's like, oh, anyway. I don't know if there was anything else you had about that chapter.
Um, well, I believe you did mention briefly about the quilt that was given away, that was borrowed to show to people, and then the husband gave it away to dignitaries. I'm pretty sure
I would love to have been a
this
fly on the
this
wall
is
of that
this
meeting.
isn't the quilt, but it's the same pattern, right? Isn't it this
Right.
one?
Yeah. I think she said I think it said Mary Kay showed her the picture and she was like, yeah, that's it. That's what it
Yeah.
looked like.
Um,
Um,
I I would be.
I would love to be a fly on the wall of the meeting with the dignitaries, where the dignitaries are like, "Oh my goodness, what a wonderful quilt. Do you think your wife could make us one?" And he says, "Why don't I just give you this one and she'll make another one later?" Something like that. Like
Well,
I can't even wrap my head around it.
great, great. It was Grace Tyler's husband, and she was so devastated that even 50 years later, she was still really upset about that. And because of being so upset, she didn't loan something else to the exhibit that followed with this book.
And I
Uh,
don't blame her.
no, I would be so devastated, and then husband might that might have turned into one of those true crime stories that you like to listen to. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm guessing Grace Tyler's mind, it's like, first time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me. I'm not going to let that happen again. I would not blame her at all.
yeah, that one was a super duper bummer. Um, do you want to moving on here to Aunt Lizzie?
Oh, oh, poor Elizabeth Cogdill Reagan. This picture,
Yeah,
this poor old lady. Oh my gosh. And here, okay, so she would have been like in her 40s here, I guess. Or I'm sorry, in her, no, 60s, 80s, 80s, 70s.
dude, I
How old
don't
would
know.
she be
What are
here? I
you
can't
even
do the math.
saying? You're just
I'm trying to do
getting
the
numbers over and over
my
and
brain just my brain just went Yahtzee. Okay, so she was born in like what? To do math here. So she was 60. Okay. Okay, so she's in her 80s in this picture. She's very elderly. But could somebody not have brushed her hair or something? Like, old lady.
over.
Um,
I I thought this whole like building a school and stuff in the year, because they're talking about a in 1910 the alumni of Pi Beta Phi fraternity voted to establish a settlement school in honor of the founders of the fraternity, and they chose the Appalachian Mountain region. Did I say that okay for you?
you did. You
Okay.
did.
Um, and I found it very interesting that it says here a couple paragraphs down, on January 20th, 1912, Martha Hill of Nashville was hired to teach at the school for 3 months at a salary of $40 per month. Well, I looked.
Yeah, I thought about that.
$40
What is that?
$40 a month now would be 1,300. And I was like, that's actually not half bad when you consider that things were significantly expensive. She likely probably didn't have a car, and a lot of the other really
Yeah.
dumb crap that we have to pay for today for a little settlement school.
Yeah, $1,300 a month though is that's rough living, even in a very disparate place.
At this time, at 1912, I don't
Well, no,
know.
I'm
I
just
don't
saying
know if
like
that's true.
today, even in a very rural place, I think $1,300 a month would be tough to live on. So, I mean, that's all I'm saying. Just
No, I'm just saying for the position, because remember, this is a woman in a school in
yeah,
1912. Um,
yes.
and I actually think that they're paying her pretty well, all things considered, at the time. What are you
Yeah, I
looking
mean
for?
that was my sorry. I just had a book a lunch because I've been doing a lot of
A
reading
book of
and
land.
it's all falling on my keyboard. Oh my gosh, I'm such a mess tonight.
But the
Um,
quilt behind you is beautiful.
it's exquisite. Yeah, at first thought, yeah, I thought, oh, well, $40 a month seems like a lot of money then. So yeah.
Well,
And
no,
then
and
maybe
then the
my
fact
initial
too,
instinct was right.
and then the fact too, let's see, the first session opened in March with 14 pupils. 3 months later, 33 were enrolled, and 2 years later, when the school closed for the summer, 158 students were enrolled. That is a massive, fast,
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
turnaround.
From 14 to 158 in 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that was probably a big deal for this area because, you had kids that were probably not getting really any kind of education.
Mm-hmm. No, and that was clearly, money well spent. Um, I don't know what else my brain just went bloop.
Well, it's funny as I was reading this, and I think, I mean, I remember reading this ages ago, and I had to remind myself as I was reading, I was like, Aerocraft. Why does it sound so familiar? I mean, I know I've read this before. And I'm like,
Right.
duh, it's because it became Aeromont School of Arts and Crafts, which is like a really big, place for people to go.
Oh.
Um, yeah, it's like one of the, I mean, there's like the Campbell School, and then there's I don't know what's in, maybe Campbell is in North Carolina. I can't remember. There's a bunch of those schools, the arts and crafts schools that you can go to. Um, I've never been there. It's one of those things that's always been like on my bucket list to go to one of those.
Oh. Like just for funsies, or do you mean like to like do stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, their schools are like they're like residential programs where you go and like you could spend the whole summer, or you could go and spend like a week learning how to like weave baskets or
Mm-hmm.
make quilts or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, I thought the
Um,
story about Aunt Lizzie was interesting though, because, the fact that she was significantly elderly by the time they get these looms, or I guess it's one loom, and she comes in and like sets it right up. I thought that was
and it
pretty
had
cool.
been like
And
something like 30 years since she touched one.
yeah, and then the quilt that she made. Um, I mean, the weaving scraps alone are just amazing looking. Um, and I mean, clearly this quilt has been cared for. It's stunning. So
Um, Mary Kay is joining us via my cell phone. Um, she did mention when we were talking before that the number of kids enrolling in that school shows how many were in the area. There were no public schools at the time, and Lizzie had been the expert weaver in the area.
yeah. And
And
if I remember correctly, Mary Kay's background is in weaving. So be prepared for questions about weaving when we interview you,
yeah,
Mary Kay.
here's Aunt Lizzie's quilt. Um,
I just love that blue, that bright
mhm,
blue. I mean,
mhm.
it's like an indigo blue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean today I feel like we might call it like a royal blue.
Hmm.
Um, no, what was it like? Oh yeah, the fact that everyone knew for miles around, or I'm sorry, Aunt Lizzie knew everyone for miles around and their family histories. So she was like the grandma in the area where you'd go over there and be like, I've got to go get something from Aunt Lindsay, and you come back 5 hours later because she told just story after story after story, and it was either really, really, really interesting, or you didn't want to be rude.
It won't be a hardball.
She'd heard it 100 times. And you probably went home with like laden down with food and all kinds of things. I had some of those Aunt Lizzie's. So
Mary Kay just said, yes, I loved the link to weaving and quilting here, and the striped fabric was like linsey woolsey.
ah. I don't know if I told you, but when I went to the Zebra Quilt Retreat in Temecula, Mary Kay lectured there, and she lectured on Linsey Woolsey or Cottonsy Woolsey. And I got to touch all of those fabrics, and she had a couple quilts, and they are, so I'm trying to remember, it was the American Quilt Making book. It was the all of the essays or the papers from like the first 10 years of
Oh, the American Quilt
uncoverings.
Study. It was, hold
Yeah,
on.
and her
Quilt Making
article
in
was,
America.
or yeah, Quilt Making in America. Her paper was specifically on, that topic.
Mhm.
And I want to say it was one of the petticoats that was shown in the article, or in the images she had there. And I got to touch it, and it was scratchy as hell. I was like, oh Lord, I would not want to wear that. I hope that they had something cotton underneath to keep their legs from itching.
Um, Mary Kay said the photo of her messed up hair was by Doris Ullman, a famous documentary photographer.
Hmm. Yes, and I kind of wondered, did Doris come in and say, "See, you're looking a little unpoor. Let's make you look worse. It's the depression, man." Rough up her hair a little bit.
Oh, she said it was definitely staged.
Oh, poor old lady. Anyway.
Yeah, she might, yeah, like half of me is like she might have gone in there looking really cute, and I feel like this is a good candidate for one of those photos that they do where they like bring a photo to life and they add color back into it. That would be really cool.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Poor old thing.
I guess it's
Um, yeah, I like her dress or her house coat or whatever it is. I guess looks like a dress.
Um,
I would not have guessed that this picture was taken in the 1930s,
no,
but
I wouldn't.
I mean, there's really not other context clues to it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so do we want to move on to Edna?
Well, I
Edna
figured you
Gossage?
wanted to because there's something on page 85 that I thought you would have been like, oh, I'm very excited to read about this.
The eagle?
Yeah.
Well, this is when the eagle was a problem.
Um,
Um,
it was news to me for like the Blue Eagle was a very familiar insignia printed on product advertisements and package labels in 1933 and 34. I'm sure that probably wasn't news to you at this point, getting into your big bootied eagle research. Although
I
I
mean,
can't
really,
really tell that this one has a big booty or not.
it doesn't because it doesn't even have a tail. You know what? You can't even see his tail. Actually, yeah, I mean, the eagle used as like a device like this, like kind of an emblem. I haven't really gone there yet, but
Mhm.
thank you for adding that entire line of research I need to do.
Um, I thought that these friendship blocks made for Edna in appreciation of her efforts to help her local garment workers union. These blocks are interesting because I mean it's dated 1757.
I believe that's local 1757, honey. That's the
Okay,
union
good,
number.
good. I thought, okay, good, because I thought I was like really weird, and I was like, what does that mean? And then like, thank you.
The local gives you the clue that we're talking about a union.
I wasn't sure if it was a union or if it was someone's name, because I've never been in a union. Um,
I grew up in a union family, so
yeah,
yeah.
I did not, so I'm not super well versed. Um, so Mary Kay just said that Edna was an activist.
Yes. Very much so. Yeah, and moving, I mean, this stuff, I mean, you kind of feel sorry for the company a little bit because I mean, they kind of just basically got their butt kicked and they were having stuff returned to them because,
mhm,
you know,
mhm,
um, but yeah, the Cumberland Homesteads was really interesting also because I mean, this is almost like I mean, it's a homesteading program. I understand that piece of it. I mean, we're not talking about like suburbia. We're talking about, settling, areas that needed like, again, it's not like a suburban neighborhood. But just seems like the way that it was kind of set up, I don't know, it has a time period relevant kind of feeling like some of the planned communities on the East Coast do. Um, Here in Maryland in particular, we have a couple of planned communities and they were built at vastly different times. I mean, they were not depression era, things, but it sounds like this whole idea of these little communities and the number of houses there, it seems like it was maybe like a blueprint for that when people in the 50s and 60s jumped off into planned communities. I'm wondering if they kind of looked at projects like this.
Well, Mary Kay just pointed out that there were resettlement projects in Maryland as well.
Yeah, so that whole line is a different set of things. The Conservation Corps, the Civilian Conservation Corps was a big deal here in Maryland as well. I think any kind of states that border the Blue Ridge, the Appalachia, they had that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah. There's it really really interesting. It's park related stuff, state park related stuff. The reason I know about it is by virtue of my husband. I I got dragged to a park one day, and instead of just saying, well, I'm going to go out and enjoy the outdoors, I decided to read the park history book.
Oh my, who does that?
I don't like to hike. So yeah, I mean, I did do it outdoors. But
Okay, I
yeah,
guess that
I'm that
counts.
girl. I'm that girl. So anyway, but yeah, I'm trying to remember what I like the picture of the house. Um
You mean the
it
barn they stayed in while or the other on
no
89?
no yeah, picture 120 on page 89. I think it's a cute house.
No, I like them too. It
Um,
reminds me of some of those stone houses that we see all the time in Pennsylvania.
mhm.
Um, and I wonder if they're all still standing even now, because at this time they were still standing, but again,
Mhm.
this was 1990. And then like the Turkey Oak Club.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
they're Marie Irwin with the Home Economist. I have to say there's a part of me that really kind of wishes that we still kind of had some of this structure in our communities.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because my mom actually worked for a home extension agent in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And where I lived, where I grew up it was definitely suburbia, right? But it was close enough to and most recently enough rural that there was still that kind of stuff around. And I guess like as I was reading about this, I was thinking the same thing. Like, wouldn't it be great if home extension and home economy was still kind of part of our vocabulary? I mean, people today sometimes don't know how to do basic stuff because they don't have that kind of like education in school anymore. Home ec.
Well, they had it when I was in
Um,
school, and I'm class of 2004, but I think they got rid of it like right after that.
It's regional. It's regional. They still had it in my high school, in the 90s, but I think in some other high schools it was being phased out and kids would come to my high school to take those like home ec type of classes.
Um, I have the T on the houses.
Okay.
Mary Kay said they're all still standing. Exit on I-40 at Crossville, Tennessee. And then Jen said she graduated in 92 and didn't have home ec. Wow.
Hmm. I think it's definitely kind of a regional thing, like what schools were getting rid of some of those programs and which ones were keeping them. And like I said, down in Virginia, there was like a whole swath of schools that were like modernizing. My school happened to be one of the ones like had the vote, like it was a VOTEC school. So
Mhm.
we had like one school did firefighting, our school did auto mechanics, like and they did like this cross thing. It was interesting. And it's a shame they probably don't have that stuff anymore.
Yeah, and I mean,
Um,
I definitely like we didn't do quilt making. We did learn some basic sewing. But I wish,
yeah.
but even if like we weren't, let's say you weren't getting that in school, let's put that aside. If you were getting it somehow in your community,
Hmm.
then it wouldn't matter. Although, like, I still think you should learn how to write a check in school and stuff like that, and like balance your
Well,
books.
I mean, just basic things like knowing how to like hem your own pants or like stitch a popped seam or put a button back on.
Even if
I mean,
I
that's the
knew
kind
how
of
to
stuff that,
hem my own pants, I would not be doing it.
well, that's the thing. I know how to hem my own pants. And do I sometimes just go like, yeah, I'm just gonna wear those pants too long.
Or sometimes
I'll scuff the length off of them.
it's okay. Now that's very 90s of you. Um, it's funny. I'm holding like a safety pin in my hand because like there have been times I've needed to like hem some pants and I just safety pin them up and like put the safety
Mhm.
pins on the inside so you can't really see them.
Oh yeah. I've done it with tape, a stapler. Yeah. But the thing is, there's a difference between not knowing how to do it at all and knowing how to do it but choosing not to. So, but you're right. I mean, again, like there's lots of people out there that have never had any of this kind of experience. Their mothers, grandmothers maybe didn't sew. Nobody taught them this stuff. Well, and I mean, their fathers and grandfathers also should have known these things, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there was a
Mm-hmm.
time I know both of my grandfathers and Dr. Dutton even, they didn't sew, but they knew how to sew on a button.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was just something you just learned, you just knew how to do. You learned how to do it. So, long story short, I wondered, are home extension offices, home economists still a thing in rural areas? I don't think so. Unless you're talking about like farm related stuff. Um, I know at least in Maryland and Virginia, because because of where I live, things like invasive insects and soil analysis. Like there's still some kind of like home extension that does that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like it used to be where,
Mm-hmm.
you could go and learn how to sew or learn how to do some kind of skill.
Well, and I wonder too, like, because part of the point that we're not talking about in this is that some of this home economist was also just kind of community gathering
Hmm. Yeah,
instead
getting
of
people
like today,
together.
like there
Yeah.
might be some of that, but it would be probably more class-based instead of community-based. Arlene
Hmm.
said, I loved home ec. I wanted to be a home ec teacher, but most schools stopped having it in the early 90s. My dad knew how to use a sewing machine better than my mom. She hated sewing.
I love that. Well, and that is an interesting thing. I mean, I think you reach a point by mid-century where women didn't have to sew anymore if they didn't want to. If they had like circumstances, like
Mhm.
my grandmother, she sewed because she was a thrifty and frugal person, but I don't think she sewed because she loved it. And I think there was a time period where she didn't sew at all. It was when my mother got interested in sewing that, my grandmother picked it back up. I mean, she'd always had a sewing machine. It was, but there are probably lots of women, and they would be like generationally, probably like my mother's age, maybe like probably a little younger than your grandparents, because you and I are about a generation apart. And they didn't have to sew if they didn't want to. So, I mean, that totally makes sense to me that, they're just women,
Doing their thing.
and that leads to today we don't have home ec classes. You have to rely on, tricking your friends who can sew or going to the dry cleaner to get your buttons sewn on.
Mary Kay said, yes, there are still extension agents here in Tennessee, gardening, crops, etc. And they do work with 4-H groups today.
4-H. Yeah, I was about to say when my mom worked for the home extension, 4-H was very much involved
It's
in there.
funny because people have, I see people talk about entering quilts in like 4-H, what are they, shows?
Yeah, like around here for
Fairs?
I think 4-H has its own thing, but they're also like very tied in with like the state fair and
Yeah, there we
the
go,
county
state fairs.
fairs.
So
Hmm.
people are constantly talking about that. I'm always just like, I don't know what that is. Um, because where I am, I'm in like this called like Greater Boston Band. About, being 20 miles or less from Boston. And apparently I am thinking like there's none of that in Massachusetts. No, there is. It's just in Western Massachusetts
Yeah.
that's, far less populated. There's mountains there too. Um,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, and
it
I
was
think here it's Western Maryland definitely is the same deal. And Western PA, it's definitely the same deal as you get farther away from like the big like urban centers of states that yeah. And I would say in
and
the Midwest, probably
oh
lots
yeah,
of this stuff. Yeah.
that's where a lot of the people that were like, I'm in the 4-H fair. Mary Kay just said, my niece just graduated with a degree in home ec in Missouri. Her
Oh, that's
first,
awesome.
yeah, her first year is going well. They teach sewing, cooking, menu planning, and finances. Boys and girls are in her classes. Oh man.
Good.
Wow.
Maybe we're getting some of this stuff back. Because, I think the important thing, and I gotta get up on my soapbox for a minute. I think there's a really important aspect of looking at history and not just like ancient history, but like, 20th century history, like just like what worked and what didn't. And, it's okay to go back to the way things worked if it makes sense to us right now. You
Hmm.
know, like there's nothing wrong with these kind of programs. In fact, they probably are much better than, some of the other stuff that gets taught in schools. And, I'm not one of these people that's like gonna lose my mind over my kid learning something that, but I feel like there's lots of skills he could have learned in school that if, I had to teach him myself.
No, I
And
agree. Even when I had home ec, we never learned things like balancing a checkbook or how anything with your money in the world works and stuff.
yeah.
And we always talked even back then about how it would be great to learn some very useful things
Mhm.
in the world. I didn't need to learn how to do a gymnastics routine. That was part of my gym class once. We had
I didn't need to learn how to square dance.
I never did that. I don't know how, but like they got rid of that. My brother had to do it, and I'm 4 years behind him, and somehow like they did away with that by the time I got into school. But yeah, so
But if you're gonna have to take gym class, I'd rather square dance than play football.
well, how about instead of that, like they just have you like go for like really nice walks or something. Like I'm all for moving your body, but like some stuff is kind of ridiculous. But like if we can do that, then we have time to learn about like things that are gonna like why don't we have a class on like nutrition and blah. Anywho, oh, it's so funny. I looked down and Mary Kay also just said nutrition and wellness too. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
I mean,
That's a lot
yeah.
better than trigonometry that I'm like.
Well, and I mean, no shade to anybody that has like advanced degrees and advanced stuff, and I mean, God forbid, I mean, like I was the art kid, and it's terrible to think they've taken arts out of some schools in some areas, but I think there does need to be a balance of things, and not every kid is destined to, or not everybody is going to become like a rocket scientist,
No,
an
we need
engineer.
other things too.
Yeah, and I feel like the kids that are going to become rocket scientists and engineers probably don't necessarily need that advanced math in high school. They could take it on the side. I don't know. I just agree with you that like there are subjects that I just think like it's great. I mean, you and I are both part of like the you should go to college like swath of growing up, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was just hammered into me like your goal is to, make sure nothing goes on your permanent record and that you get through high school with your honors diploma, and you make good grades and you go to college, and then all the rest is taken care of because that's what you needed to do. And that was not really true for me.
Oh no,
I don't think it was probably
it
true for
wasn't true for
you, and it is definitely not true for kids today. So, I go back to the fact that like that's in the world of today, that's maybe a broken plan. The American dream was a broken plan during these times. And, again, I kind of just circle back. I go back to like, I feel like we could learn from our past and take the things that worked and apply them to today. So that is my platform when I'm going to be running for president.
That'll be interesting.
So,
You can have all your yard signs and stuff that can all have a background of like quilts on it, like bring comfort back. Like
what was it? Herbert Hoover was like a chicken in every pot, a quilt on every wall, and on the
just
beds if
for
you want it
pretty
to.
on every bed.
Okay. So Mary Kay's conclusion, I think, is fantastic. And I know she had said she loves her last paragraph. So I was going to say, if I may read some of it. But before we get to that, I wanted to mention I love the appendix about how to date quilts.
Mhm.
She gets into a whole lot of really good information here. I love.
Mhm.
And then we get to the patterns.
What are you gonna
And
say about the pattern?
I can almost guarantee that if we ask her, this is going to be her answer. So don't answer this. Don't answer yet, Mary Kay. I want to ask you next week. But
Oh.
here's what I assume happened here. She wanted to write this book.
Mhm.
And she went, I'm a quilt historian. I've done all these wonderful, interviews, and I want to write this book. And Rutledge said, well, people usually buy books because they want to know how to make the quilts. So she's like, fine, we'll throw some patterns in there in the back. And indeed, there's a few patterns in the back. Um, and I think like I don't know that anybody except somebody who has like some pretty decent experience with quilting would know how to make these. So I think they're like really great references as to some of the the quilts that are here in the book, but it's also kind of like, I suspect these patterns were put in there just to satisfy the publisher. So I'm curious to know that I may be totally off, like way off. So
maybe we should open our interview next week with like, tell us the tea about the patterns.
spill the tea about this book. I do know that Routledge, from what I remember, she mentioned Nancy Lou Burdick's book, Legacy, was also published by Routledge. And I think they had a really good relationship with that publisher. Just like I know a lot of people have a relationship with Schiffer. Like they did good work. So I don't know. Yeah, I could be totally wrong. But as just an aside, I'm interested to hear the answer to that question.
Well, so then you were going to read the last little paragraph here.
Yeah, so this is a little bit more than a paragraph because I kind of like this whole section.
Okay.
So this is on the very last page. In the course of this research, I have often felt like a private detective tracking down people in quilts, then writing down the stories. As I write this conclusion, I think of the questions for which I still seek answers. I mention them here in the hopes that someone else will also be inclined to investigate them. Who are the unattributed traditional quilt makers who might have developed patterns for the commercial quilt designers? Yeah, we're still looking for this. Where are the Anne Orr quilts that appear as completed quilts in her magazine articles? I don't know. Maybe those have been found by now. How successful was the Orr studio? How many quilt patterns were sold nationally? How many women were employed? I'm hoping that maybe we've gotten closer to finding some of these answers.
Yeah, I
where
mean,
is the grand?
Maybe she will have some answers to some of these questions.
Yeah.
Next
Where
week.
is the grand prize winning quilt of this year's National Quilt Contest?
Well, we know where that is now. It's in the crab closet.
It's in the crab closet, and we're gonna have to move out some. My gosh, I mean, think of all the things we have to. We got to get rid of like the Eisenhower stuff. We got to get rid of the Kennedy stuff. Who knows what the Clintons left in there? Where are other local and regional winning quilts? Where is Mr. Frenchy Cottrell, a resident of Nashville in 1933? He is the only male quilt maker known to have won a prize in the Sears contest. I love that little detail there. Where is Grace's Tyler's Fist quilt, the one her husband gave away? Where is Ruth Bond's Black Power quilt? I also raise one issue for consideration, and I know this sends Mary Fonz's heart like soaring. Are quilts art? Early 20th century quilt designers, especially Marie Webster, Rose Kretzinger, and Anne Orr, are credited with raising the quilt from a folk art form to a fine art form. If a quilt is fine art, does it continue to be so when duplicated hundreds of times? And who deserves credit for these duplicates, the designer or the maker? Of course, this problem only arises in cases of contests, exhibits, or books, such as this one. It obviously was not an issue at the Sears National Quilt Contest, where women submitted quilts made from commercial patterns and won prizes. In short, the period of 1920 through 1940 is a rich era for research. It is a story of a long-standing traditional skill being rediscovered and transformed by people outside the circle of traditional quilt makers. Gained were thousands of new quilt makers making thousands of new quilts. Lost were regional traditional quilt forms and practices. In their place was a homogenized quilt form and a soft cover, which on the surface does not reflect the hard times of the Great Depression, but in fact does reflect the complex forces changing forever the lives of American families. Dun, dun, dun. I think it is a fantastic last paragraph too.
And they're so hard to write.
I know, right? So one thing that in this conclusion, that she mentions that I thought about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this absolutely 100%, like, why have I not really noticed this? If you look at magazines and things from the time period, there is no, like, the women's magazines don't mention anything about like having trouble feeding your family because we're in a great big depression. It's, I mean, I've seen things that are kind of coded, it's kind of like, stretching your, like protein budget, like, and those aren't the words, but it's something to that effect, that kind of hint at the fact that people struggle. But for the most part, it's like they're still selling all the stuff. They're still, they're encouraging women to sew and make things. And it really, you would not necessarily know by looking at just the popular culture magazines at the time that we were in a Great Depression. So that's like an interesting observation. And I'm kind of like, I had literally never thought about that or noticed it.
Arlene said, did you see the one posted on Facebook earlier today on the Six Know-It-Alls page? I just looked it up. Do you want to look at it real
Mhm.
quick?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. We're gonna have to Inception for just a second. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. It was just a second, right?
Hmm.
Okay. So we've got this one here. Sorry, I'm just trying to protect the person that posted it, just because I don't know if they want to be on social media.
Oh yeah,
I-
it is. It's a center of progress, right?
Yeah, she said, I found another one. Hope 12 of the top 30 finalists. However, 12 of the top 30 finalists in the 1933 Sears National Quilt Contest are still unlocated and undocumented. The number used to be 14. I hope to get it to 0, a big goal. I know, considering there have been people looking at these quilts for decades. The quilter was Mrs. G.H. Wilkie, Sue Thomas, wife to George. They lived in Shreveport, LA, or Louisiana, I'm sorry, and had one son. The Shreveport Times reports that Sue's quilt took second at the local level and received $5. The article says first, second, third place winners would be then sent to Memphis, Tennessee for regional judging. At the regional level, her quilt took third place and was sent on to Chicago, surpassing the first place local winner. Sue's granddaughter has the quilt. Her son designed appliques. He was a draftsman. I'll have to ask if he helped design the overall layout too. Pretty neat in my mind to have our 25-year-old son's help. And Mary Kay says she is working with the researcher. Let me just get these picture. Woo! So this was
Oh,
one of the
wow.
more graphic. Oh, I can zoom. Oh my God. This was one
Okay,
of the
so it
more
says a
graphic.
center of progress, and I guess it's there's a dirigible.
Mary Kay also pointed out that this particular researcher is as persistent as cake is.
I'm not sure who this person is. I'm gonna have to look.
Yeah, I really like all the what is all this interestingness here?
Yeah,
Look
I
at
don't
that
know.
train.
Yeah, I'm looking at the yeah, the stuff along the side, these types of transportation. I feel like transportation was a really big one for, people at this time when they were thinking about, a century of progress. They did hone in on transportation a lot because
Well,
it
and
was such
here's
a
a
big change.
phone. We've got light
Hmm.
bulbs. Mary Kay said this is the Sears building.
Hmm. Okay, the Sears building. I
There's
was trying to
more.
I was like, what building is that?
There you go. Yeah, there's more photos here.
Oh,
Wow.
what a cool quilt.
Yeah. Look at all that quilting. All the crosshatch. What is, oh, and look, isn't this a telephone quilted down here?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's stuff in the quilting too. Oh, that is so
Okay.
neat.
Yeah, it's a telephone. And then I think that's like a, oops, sorry. I think it's like a bus right here. I'm
Oh,
in
they're
love.
flowers.
I'm in love with this foliage.
Oh yeah, they're like little, I don't know, little pansies or something, like little, huh.
Oh, that phone is so great. It's really hard to do. I feel like Mary Fonz right now, or I'm sorry, Mary Ann Fonz, and the whole like faces are hard. I think stuff like this is hard. Let's
But
see.
how charming. I mean, obviously, they could very well have traced something, or perhaps or I don't know, though, didn't you, in reading it, you said they said somebody helped draft it. So it was
Mhm.
probably somebody that was able to draw, had some good drawing skills.
So when Mary Kay said to compare it to the quilt in the book here, and
Hmm.
and the things that were put on here, I actually prefer this new one more. But I will say that the works done on this one seem to be a little more sophisticated, I guess. Let me see what. Mrs. Wilkie's entry will be among 30 contestants who will have the opportunity to compete for more substantial monetary awards. That's so great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just looked in that group. The person this researcher, I don't know her. So
Well, you know what? Here I was like trying to like not show her, but like she's right here. I was trying. Mary Kay said transportation was a big theme. Um,
It makes sense because I mean, you think right now, like if we were to like Century of Progress, if it was a topic right now, people would probably make quilts that had like computers and cell phones on them, right? Like that's
that's true.
through our right now lens. So it would make total sense to me that like in 1933, people were like, okay, transportation that has changed a whole bunch. So
All right.
that is a neat quilt. I really like.
Yeah.
I like how it's got that like undulating around the. She broke up the lines, so it wasn't like this solid line of sashing, but that she did that undulating thing. That's pretty neat.
I agree. And then Mary Kay reminded me as well that on page 43 of the book, it shows the Sears, I mean, not well because just the color, but it shows the Sears building. It's so funny. This version of the Sears building really kind of reminds me of like the Great and Powerful Oz. Like it's so like,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
does have that kind of.
and she's still sending me more. And then she wants to know stuff if you remember that Dr. Dutton went to the fair and took notes.
Yes, I do.
Speaking of just asking cake things, does everybody here know that it was Cake's birthday? Like yesterday? Was it yesterday? It was yesterday, right?
Yes, in fact, Double T and Pocket Dutton. Oh, okay. All right. You just have to show it off for a minute. Double T had his party gear out, as did Pocket Dutton. They had a little party. Um, one last thing that I wanted to mention in the book, because I think we're coming up on time. In the glossary, elbow quilting. So this is page 103. This is another name for fan quilting. And knowing that my great grandmother, from what I've been told, she used Baptist fan a lot. It makes so much sense to me that you'd stick your elbow down, you got a piece of chalk or whatever, and you just make the arc. And then you would just measure from there and just keep making arcs.
I never ever put those two things together.
Well, I mean, because what I had seen, it might have even been in one of the earlier interviews in here, where they talked about doing Baptist fan was so popular, the fan quilting. I feel like there's tons and tons and tons of quilts, especially out of the South, that use that. But, you always talk about like you could just use a string and a pencil, right? You
Right.
put one end of the string down and then you just, but if you don't even have that, like literally you can use your arm and then you get that first line and then, then you could just, measure down with like, one of the digits of your finger or something to make the next one. And it makes total sense to me. Like, all you need is like the marking implement.
Yeah, I never put those two things together.
Well, I didn't either. And I had never heard of it called elbow quilting, but I was like, oh. It may have been a regional name for it, but definitely something that I'm like, like it makes sense to me as it comes together.
Arlene is excited that you're a fellow Libra.
Yeah, and Arlene, I noticed you had wished a happy birthday to a number of people. And were they all birthdays yesterday? And not just like this week? Because if it was, that means I share a birthday with one of our other friends, Rebecca. So I'm curious to know if it was also Rebecca's birthday yesterday. So I'll have to
Mary Kay,
I'll have to stalk her and say happy birthday.
Mary Kay said that she found out about the elbow quilting by she actually had 4 quilters sitting around a quilt frame. And that's how she learned elbow quilting.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's so cool.
Which would make sense why I like never put 2 and 2 together, because I've never like seen anyone do that. And Arlene said yes, all on the 23rd.
So many wonderful people were born on the 23rd.
Yeah, I guess so. So many annoying people were born on the 23rd. If it makes everybody happy, I mean, I hope it does. When I called Stephanie yesterday and she answered the phone, I said, "Hi, birthday cake," instead of just like, "Hi, cake." And it was really cute.
It was cute.
Oh, Mary Kay is so lucky. She got to sit around these ladies with a quilting frame that hung from the ceiling.
Oh,
Mary
I love
Kay,
it.
why didn't you take video of this with your smartphone then? So that we could have watched it all. That makes me really jealous. Well, it just means that next week when we have her here on the screen, that she gets to tell us about more fun stories and things about her doing
Yeah,
this.
and you guys, if you have questions for Mary Kay, definitely, send them to us. Because
Mary Kay does
we
say that
will.
she has photos.
Oh, well.
And she says she has a video. Is it the kind, Mary Kay, that's digital enough that we can actually share it, or do we need to erect
Do we need to get one of those companies that takes the Super 8 and makes it into I'm assuming what this was what was this, 1990?
Yeah, she's got VHS.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's too funny. I have to say, as we wrap up here, I was talking to somebody about the bicentennial quilts that I've been looking at. And I know there's lots of quilters, I always say women of a certain age, but there are quilters generation ahead of me that are kind of why do you really care about this centennial stuff, this bicentennial stuff? Ooh, who cares? But I'm I've thought this for a while, but especially reading soft covers, 1990 was a really good time for Mary Kay to talk to these women, these elderly women that, had been quilting all their lives, or they had these stories from the Depression. She was nearing the end of the road to be able to get those stories. And I feel some sense of that with some of these 1960s, 1970s era quilters. There's lots of interviews with women that started quilting then and then became designers or had companies. I mean, we think about people Marianne Vons and Liz Porter. They started their company in the 80s. They started quilting in the 70s. So we have lots of interviews and sound bites from people like that. But what about the people that just, maybe made a few quilts and still value quilting, but the bicentennial was the thing that was the instigator for them. Those are some people I'd like to have conversations with, and we're kind of running out of time. I would say in the next 20 years, many of those people will be gone. So I would have to say, Mary Kay, you inspire me on so many different levels, but definitely in reading the interviews with the ladies in here, definitely kind of put a fire under my rear, because I've lost some family members that I never got to do the discussions that I wanted to have. And I know, you're in the same boat in some cases. And it's kind of just a reminder to myself that I want to get the information from people and talk to people before it's too late.
And Mary Kay just said, absolutely capture their memories, because yes, you're running out of time.
Yep. Well, on that bummer of a note.
Yeah, right? We started with kind of bummery music, everyone go have a snack.
Yeah. So yeah,
cake.
we're gonna go have a rave with Pocket Dutton. He looks like he's got an ice cream cone on his head.
He really does. All
I had were these tan craft paper colored Post-it notes. Because I was oh, I need to make him a hat, and it was last minute. So
you can find something to create whatever you want nearby. You're that crafty. So everybody, don't forget, you'll see stuff on social media, but next week on October 1st, oh my God, October 1st, we're going to be here at 7 p.m. Eastern to do our interview with Mary Kay. So you're not going to want to miss that. And then we'll post out the schedule for that month and all that jazz. And then be sure to get an email to us at quiltnerding@gmail.com or on the social media platforms if you had a question for Mary Kay that you want to ask. Of course, you can still ask live in the chat and stuff. We just try our best to give a heads up about all the embarrassing things we're going to ask ahead of time so that people can be prepared.
And don't forget to sign up if you want one of those book plates. And we're not talking about just Merikay Waldvogel written on a piece of paper. We are talking about Mary Kay will write it directly to you. So, that's a once in a lifetime chance.
That's fun. And where else did you put that? You put that in the Facebook group, right?
It is in the Facebook group. I put it here in the and I'll repost. I'll bump it up so that
Yeah, if anyone's
for it.
looking for that on the Instagram, just send a message to the Quilt Nerding Instagram profile and we can send out that link to you. Oh my God, Janet's gonna be in Alaska on a cruise. You better think of us, Janet. We'll be thinking of you and how you're not like with us. But anywho, Mary Kay says, love you too, and good night.
Night, guys. We'll see you soon.
Bye.